كمان مرة معكم مشاهدينا. بستقبل هلا from the بيروتر كاتارين سورينسن. ويلكم تو أم.تي.في again. موضوع حلقتنا اليوم رح يكون لأول مرة بالتاريخ، وعم نحكي عن مقالة الأعمار من 65 وطلوع هي أكثر من أعمار اليونج بيبل، وهيدا الشيء بدنا نبحثه هلا أكيد لأنه شغلة خطيرة جدا. كاتارين, from over population to under population.
Yes.
How come? For the first time.
Yes. So as you said, we're living in a very strange period in terms of global population dynamics, because for the first time in history, people over the age of 65 outnumber those of the younger generations. So if you consider kind of the population trends throughout human history, for the longest time, it was one of kind of constant increase. And now, because due to rising life expectancy and declining birth rates, we're living in a world in which more than 2/3 of the global population lives in a country in which the fertility rate is lower than the replacement rate of 2.1. And essentially what the replacement rate is the number of children women have to have in order for the population to stay constant. So 2/3 of the world's population is living in countries in which that's no longer the case. So we're seeing kind of a consistent decline. And this is affecting regions all across the globe. Interestingly, the one exception is sub-Saharan Africa. So in Africa in general, the median age is 19. Compare that to Europe, which is 45. So that's a great disparity. And the UN actually predicted that by 2100, so in like 75 years, over 1/3 of the world's population will live in sub-Saharan Africa. So it has economic implications, it has implications for migration. So it's both very strange when compared to kind of the global trend worldwide, and then also will be having a lot of ramifications for countries around the world.
How can this kind of demographic issues can actually influence the country's economics or the overall global's influence?
Yeah, so it's important to understand that, demographic trends are an economic and a geopolitical issue. So, the size of a country's population affects its workforce, it affects its taxpayer base, it affects its consumer markets, who's purchasing goods. It also affects, its military recruitment pools. So when you have a smaller workforce population, you have lower productivity, you have fewer taxpayers, and then you also have, a smaller group from which to, recruit for military purposes. So this changes, how countries think about war and defense. This changes the, economic productivity of these nations. And it also has immigration implications as well. So one of the US is experiencing these same kind of population declines, but it's managed to stay like a little bit ahead of the demographic collapse you're seeing in East Asia and Europe, because it continues to attract a wide variety of immigrants. And part of this is to do, with capitalizing on human capital, right? Bringing in talent, bringing in smart people to sustain the economy. So I actually had a university professor who said once that the US's most valuable import is math, because it imports, people from China, people from India, these engineers, people from countries like Lebanon, that then is able to kind of sustain exactly the brains of the world, to sustain the economic growth, even if they're dealing with a smaller population. So the economic consequences are very, very large.
So as you argued in your article, population today has become a geopolitical issue.
Yeah, 1,000%, because it affects migration, immigration policies as well. It's also really interesting to see how population affects like political instability. So if you look at a lot of regimes that underwent revolutions, they tended to have young populations, because young people, particularly young men, are particularly susceptible to more radical ideology and to kind of like, they're a good pool to capitalize on resentment and discontent.
And Katharine, if you want to go back to Lebanon, how does this demographic changes can affect Lebanon and the wider region of the Middle East?
Exactly. A country like Lebanon, because we have a lot of sensitivity. So how in Lebanon in particular?
Yes. No, demographics is obviously a hot topic in Lebanon. And so Lebanon illustrates kind of a lot of the population dynamics complexities very well, because as we were mentioning, the brain drain, Lebanon suffers from a brain drain, right? It has a very highly educated workforce, and yet
They're
a lot of
scattered
its,
all over the world.
Exactly. A lot of its population moves abroad. So the Middle East as a whole actually tends to have a younger population than a lot of other Western countries, but that's only helpful if you can get the people to stay there, right? If you have a young population that then travels to Europe or travels to the US and they reap the benefits of your young, you know, your young
Talents.
youth, then that's not going to, you know, benefit Lebanon itself. So Lebanon has struggled with, you know, with the brain drain, you know, basically since the Civil War. And there was actually a really interesting study that showed between 2017 and 2021, Lebanon's birth rate fell by 21% because it's also becoming more expensive to have kids. And, you know, there are also kind of changing social understandings of, you know, at what age do people and women want to get married? At what age do they want children?
Even
and this,
in Lebanon, too.
Yeah, this is a global
definitely.
issue. You see cost of living is increasing everywhere. You know, for my friends back in the US, there's all these studies about how women and men are delaying marriage and delaying having kids because
of
housing
economic
costs.
uncertainty.
Exactly.
So expensive.
It's so expensive to buy a house. It's so expensive to raise a child. A lot of countries have not great maternity and paternity leaves. In the US, it's horrible. I'm not incredibly familiar about what Lebanon's policy is.
No, we're not very
We're
far
not very
behind.
far from being horrible.
Okay, so you know you have to make it economically viable to have kids. So what's also been really interesting is you see a lot of governments try to like incentivize women to have kids.
Plus,
and
women are more career-driven today, so they're looking to
Totally,
grow
yes.
in their careers before
Exactly.
becoming mothers most of the time.
So there's an
No,
please
continue.
I was going to say there's an emphasis on like women education, women in their career paths, and you see some governments like Japan, South Korea, Hungary, and Italy have issued like cash bonuses where they'll essentially will like pay families to have kids, but those haven't had the incredible
results.
success because it doesn't kind of, you know, solve the larger costs of what it means to raise a family.
I wanted to add on, Christina, a lot of governments are trying to solve this problem and push and motivate people to, you know, and it's not being a huge success until now. And what's the reason?
100%.
We still have 1 minute, Catherine. Maybe we can.
Yes. No, I think kind of as I was just speaking on, they're almost doing like temporary solutions. Like, yes, if you give families an injection of cash, that ameliorates their financial conditions now. But if you track the cost of a kid's life over 18 plus
it's
years,
just momentary.
you know, it's just momentary. So you have to make it, you know, easier for younger people to buy houses, to educate kids, to take time off from work if you really want to, you know, encourage.
And you have to have stability in the country.
Exactly. You need stability and you need a cheap cost of living.
Catherine Sorensen, صحفية from the Beiruter. Thank you so much. It is always a pleasure to have you here at M.T.V. Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you so much, Christina. Thank you so much, Shadi. It was a pleasure sharing this table with you. بختم أنا بشغلة إلى راسل كرو وقت عم بيعمل الأكسبتنس سبيتش تبعه بال 2001 وقت أخذ الأوسكار لاد جلاديتر. قال حرفيا لكل الأشخاص يلي عندهم حلم, and if you are on the downside of the advantage, it's possible. We love you. Thank you so much. See you soon.